suit and tie and get your hair cut way up high. Get yourself a lawyer, son. You're gonna need a real good one.
And you're lucky because our real good lawyer, there are a few lines free right now. 1300 222 774. If you need some legal advice, David Whiting stands ready to administer it. David, good morning.
Good morning, Virginia.
Why have you brought me 437 pages of amendments to a bit of legislation that I have no intention of reading anyway?
Okay, well, it's because of the kind of person that you are, Virginia. It's 498 pages.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to deprive you of a few pages there.
And well, they could have been the important ones, you don't know.
No doubt.
In 2018, the government announced mammoth changes to residential tenancies. That we talked about things like minimum 5-year lease terms. So you can have a lease. We're recognising that in this world there are lots of people who are long-term tenants, and there ought to be perhaps a different consideration for long-term tenants.
Where you can bring a pet in, where you can paint a wall and not have to go through all the rigmarole.
Yes. Well, you've still got to ask for permission for a pet, but if the landlord wants to say no, the landlord's got to go to VCAT to have an argument as to why you shouldn't.
As to why Fluffy can't have a happy life with you in your little flat.
I think it's not the question of Fluffy, it's the 4 greyhounds you want, I think.
The 4 greyhounds aren't the problem. Humans are the problem, not the pet, as our famous ABC vet used to say. Anyway, go on.
So, 498 pages of amending legislation. So my view would be we'll be on it for 6 or 8 weeks before we could do it justice. I want to flag it. The rule change occurred today. It was to have occurred on the 1st of July last year, but because of COVID was postponed. So there are new form leases that come into effect today. So if a lease is to be signed today or after today, it's a different form to the one we had before. If you are if you're moving from a fixed term tenancy that expires and you roll into a monthly tenancy, then there are minimum standards that apply. Interesting one. A couple of months ago, I had a friend who was renting, and her lease said that when we want to advertise this property for sale, you'll consent to your things being used in the advertising photographs.
No, I won't.
Well, there's now a provision that says you need my permission, and my permission can be withdrawn.
Okay.
This particular person had some valuable artwork she really didn't want displayed.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you can now get compensation in circumstances where there is an open for inspection.
That's excellent.
So they're all lots of positives.
We had some homework we'll get to in a moment, but I just wanted to clarify. Remember, we had our retired nurse Susan calling in on the open line just before the news. She was concerned at the vaccination practice she was seeing going on in television reports of the COVID-19 vaccine being administered, and that the traditional draw back the syringe slightly to make sure there's no blood there in the needle, and therefore you haven't hit a vein, before you depress the plunger. And I'm being reliably informed over and over here by nurses, by GPs, by others saying that is no longer practice. That's not standard practice anymore. And here's the quote: "It's not necessary to draw back on the syringe plunger before injecting a vaccine. And this is because it's not considered a deep intramuscular injection. It's still done for deep IM injection." Kath, a registered nurse in Geelong, who's also a recent nurse immuniser graduate. So stand assured, Susan and everybody else, that the practice is pretty established. I have to say, my sister Angela is a nurse practitioner. She gives me all my jabs, and she does it so quickly. It's like jab in, gone, that clearly she's not drawing back. And my sister Angela, who is formidable, she knows exactly what she's doing.
Right, okay.
She's terrifying, Angela.
Okay.
But not to the babies. The babies never cry, apparently, when she injects them, which I think is a wonderful thing. What was our homework?
Our homework was Josh from Northcote. He had an investment apartment in South Yarra, and his tenants were periodically leaving. In fact, there were periods where his rental property were vacant because of the noise from the tunnelling. And the question that he had was, does he have a claim for compensation as a consequence of losing the tenant? I don't believe that he does. The Land Compensation and Acquisition Act doesn't help him. It doesn't mean he doesn't have a claim under noise legislation. But or vibration legislation. There's been a similar case in New South Wales that was lost by the landlord based on the wording in the legislation. But perhaps it's an opportunity for a class action. There'll be lots of people like him.
There really
Not that
would
I'm hustling.
be.
Yes.
And it's strange to think the state government and the builders of the diggers of the tunnel would not have anticipated this or managed for it in some way?
Well, I don't, in all honesty, know how you do it, because it's in order for this to be done in an efficient time frame.
You dig night and day.
You dig night and day.
Sure.
No, it's not like a building site where it's 7:30 till 6.
But then you say, here's accommodation over here that you have for as long as the digging in the night and day goes on.
No, but it's on a day-by-day basis. It's not I'm not moving you out.
Yeah.
And it's only temporary. So if you're renting an apartment and they're going to be digging for the next 3 days under your apartment, they'll give you somewhere for 3 days. But you don't move all your goods. You just move some of them.
I'm sorry to tell you that today's allocation of Victorian travel vouchers, the allocation was exhausted by 10:04 a.m. So just as
4 minutes.
as you and I were about to
Has
start
the news
chatting.
finished? Yes.
News finished. So all gone, I'm afraid. Those of you texting me saying they're all gone, yes, they are. New allocation of Vic Regional travel vouchers released at 10 a.m, exhausted at 10:02. I'm being told 10:04. I know. It's why I'm on air, so I wouldn't bother, but I wouldn't bother anyway. I should spend my hard-earned out in the regions, I think. Let's answer your questions. 1300 222 774 is our number. Ange in Moonee Valley, you're first up today. Good morning.
Good morning, and I'm hoping there's still that last law handbook available.
To be honest, it is. We didn't give it away last week.
I did have one, didn't I? Just one second, Ange. Katrina? No, we don't have it for you. We did manage to allocate that. I'm sorry, Ange, but go ahead with your question.
Anyway, I was wondering, in terms of handing a property over to, for example, a child, must it be in a will or can it be in the codicil?
A codicil is a document that amends a will and then republishes the will. So you then read the will and the codicil together and you treat them as a single testamentary disposition. So you can give away a property in a codicil, yes.
Thank you kindly.
There you go. Nicely dealt with. Some breaking news for you. Queensland has recorded 8 new cases of COVID-19 community transmission overnight. 6 of those cases are close contacts of existing cases. So we can presume, I think safely, they will already have been in quarantine, home quarantine and isolation. The origin of the 2 others are under investigation, but the Premier says it's likely they'll be linked to the current cases. They're in day 1 now of their 3-day lockdown. You've got family in Noosa?
I do.
Noosa.
Yes.
Yeah. Did they go via or through or Brisbane or anything?
It's interesting. The legislation here and in Queensland carves out airports. So provided you're not in the airport for more than 24 hours,
Really?
so that you're allowed come from outside Brisbane, provided you go straight to Brisbane Airport. Then the airport, there's a carve out for the airport. Yep.
Fantastic. That's really good to know. Margin Faulkner, good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, go ahead.
Just wondering, our neighbour's property has a driveway that's probably about 8 in the old scale inches higher than our property. So when it rains, the water cascades off their driveway and in underneath our house.
How old's the driveway, Marge?
How long is it?
How old is the driveway?
The driveway
how old
would
is the
be-
surface on the driveway?
I think that it would be somewhere around about, I think both of the houses were done in the 1960s.
All right, so you've had this water flow for 50 years. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes, correct.
Yes, yeah. I would be having a talk to the neighbour. There are provisions in the Water Act about interfering with the natural flow of water. So if they had cemented or their driveway yesterday and all of a sudden you had this water flow, then you would have a claim against them. But you're really talking about 50 years of flow. You might almost argue that that's now the natural flow. So
Okay.
have a talk to them about whether or not it would be possible for them to perhaps put a lip on their driveway to force their stormwater back onto their property.
But can Marge compel them to?
50 years on, I would doubt it.
Okay.
All right.
So
It's actually a rental property, so it would be very difficult to...
So then you need to talk to the landlord, and it might be a stormwater issue. I'll take it on notice, Marge. Listen next week.
And,
Okay, lovely.
Thank you.
And in the meantime, ask nicely and see if that goes. Gigi has called in from Kilmore. Love your name. Morning, Gigi.
Hello.
Hello, go ahead.
I wanted to know just a general question regarding an insurance plan. Insurance. I just wanted to know if somebody got into a hardship situation, financial hardship situation, and they've been paying it for over 12 years, would they be able to recall some of that money?
Gigi, can we distinguish between a prepaid funeral and funeral insurance?
Right.
Funeral insurance it's like taking an insurance policy and you're saying, if I die in this time period, you will pay for my funeral. All right?
Right.
And that's an annual policy that you pay.
Yep.
And if you didn't die in the period, they keep all the premium and they don't pay for your funeral. So the fact that you've paid for 12 years means absolutely nothing. It's 12 separate insurance contracts.
Oh, okay.
All right. So on the other hand, there are a number of funeral providers where you can prepay your funeral and you give them an amount of money.
But she wants the money back, just in case
Well,
you
an
fall in hard
insurance
times.
policy, not a hope, right?
Pardon?
So
Say it again clearly.
If it's an insurance policy, then the answer is not a hope because it's just gone, right?
It's an insurance plan.
Yes, if it's an insurance plan, they are annual insurance policies. You pay a premium, so if you would take one out today and you died but before the 29th of March next year, they would pay for your premium, but you can't get back insurance premiums just because you haven't made a claim on the policy.
Oh.
All right, now that's different from a prepaid insurance, prepaid funeral, but at the moment you start asking for money back, you're changing the very nature of your funeral plan.
But Gigi wouldn't be able to get money back from any of them, would she? If she
No.
suddenly changed her mind and said, look, I'm actually on hard times, could you give me back some of that money? I'm not going to take out the plan anymore. They wouldn't return.
Yeah, incredibly unlikely because if you go to an insurance person, a funeral home and you try and get that kind of prepaid funeral,
Yep.
they're required to invest the money.
Gigi, does you or someone you know, do you need some financial assistance right now?
Yes. And not me, but somebody
Someone
else.
that you know.
Yeah.
Gigi, there are welfare organisations that can help you. Can I pop you on hold and we can perhaps share a couple of them with you?
Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Paul in Malvern, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Virginia.
Go
Good morning,
ahead.
David. Yes, look, I had a building dispute during a building project, and I sought advice from a lawyer. The lawyer the lawyer helped me. They sent me a bill for, I think, about $5,000, and I thought that was it. And then they sent me another bill for about $7,000. Now, then I said, hang on, why is it so expensive? You haven't given me a disclosure statement. I contacted the Legal Services Commission and they said if they haven't given you a disclosure statement, they can't recover their fees. Then they issued proceedings in the Magistrates Court, and then the Legal Services Commission said we can't help anymore now.
Oh, that's right, because there are proceedings on before the court, but there are lots of authorities, Paul. So to make it for everybody else's, if the bill is $750 or less without including out-of-pocket expenses or GST, there is no requirement for a written document. If the fee is $3,000 or less, not including GST and out-of-pocket expenses, then there's the ability to give a short form disclosure statement and costs agreement. But if it's $3,001 or more, then there are formal disclosure requirements and a formal costs agreement requirement. And if they're not provided, then what the Act says is that a lawyer may not sue for, recover or retain any money in relation to the work. Now, what then they're allowed to do is they can then make an application to the costs court, and they need to provide a bill in a particular form, all of which will result in you paying a bucket load less money, Paul. So your defence to the Magistrates Court claim is that they haven't complied with their disclosure requirements, and you would need to. And so that's your defence.
Okay,
Right,
but
so
it's not a complete defence. It goes through a taxation process.
No, it's a complete defence to the bill. It's not a complete defence to the argument about whether they are entitled to money or not, but they are required to give you an itemised bill in taxable form. They will only be given costs on scale, so you have absolutely extraordinary opportunities to negotiate your figures, Paul.
Okay.
All right. Now, you might need to make an application to the Costs Court to extend the time within which to ask for the itemised bill, but as a matter of practice, that's almost always given. So go for your life.
All right, good luck. We hope that goes well, Paul. Have you read all 498 pages, was it?
I've read the index.
You've read the index.
I read the index and the press releases as the starting
to
point.
the
yes.
amendments to the rental tenancies legislation. I'm glad you have, because Peter in Rowville is a landlord and he has a question on it. Peter, good morning.
Good morning, all. How are you?
Well, thank you.
Yes, I've recently painted the rental property in neutral colours. So my understanding is the tenant can come in and paint several rooms different colours. And if I were to sell that place, do they have to return it to the neutral colour that was originally painted?
Don't know, Peter, but that's a homework one. All right. I would have assumed that they would need to make good what they did, but I will check and let you know.
All right, so we've got another homework. You're going to get so
Well,
many.
I've got nothing to do over Easter, yes.
And so many questions about this as well. Philip in Wodonga, good morning.
Good morning, Virginia and David. Thanks
Hi.
for taking the call. Testing your memory here. I called you late November, early December regarding an inappropriate offer of housing by the department.
Yes.
Regarding the not very nice person being
Who
a
live
prior
next
tenant.
door. Yep.
Yeah, and yes, and also we've been relocated thanks to an appeal process.
That's great.
To the department, so we've got a new property, so that's great. Also, I'd like to thank. We had a lot of help with a lady by the name of Angela from Council from Homeless Persons, who did a great job and supported us through that process.
Good to hear.
And also, I'd like to thank Richard Wynn's office, who is the Minister for the Department of Housing.
Do you have a question for us?
Also, week-to-week tenancy. I'm being asked to sign a week-to-week lease. Can you tell me what that means for a permanent tenant in the Department of Housing Property?
I don't know what form the Ministry Housing, the department leases take, but if it's a week-to-week lease, then the lease could normally be brought to an end. The question is, what's the period of the lease? So if it's a lease that says this is it, it's week-to-week, the normal assumption is that you are able to terminate that lease on a week-by-week basis. So if Well, you've got an advantage over me, Philip. You've got the document in front of you. I don't. So there will be a provision in the document that says termination, and it may well be that termination is allowed on a week-by-week basis, but you've got the document. It will tell you that. So there's a difference between a lease which says your rent will be $300 a week, and there is a different where what we're doing is we're fixing the rent but not the period. So we're calculating the rent but not the period of the term. And the other one is a lease which comes along and says, well, you're a week-by-week tenant. All right? You need to work out from the document in the section headed termination how it's brought to an end.
Okay, no worries.
All right, thank you, Philip.
Thank you, bye-bye.
Glad to hear that you've had a good experience. Glad to hear, sorry about this, my fault there. Glad to hear you've had a good experience and also that you're in better accommodation. That's really terrific to hear. Now, Robert's in Spring Hill. Something's been going on near his property that bothers him. Hi, Robert.
Hi, David. I've got a farm in Spring Hill and I'd like to know what are my rights in respect of the council spraying herbicide on the roadside. We cleared the blackberries and gauze, etc., off the verge. And yesterday they were doing some spraying, and I've got two questions. The questions in two parts. What are my rights, if any, in having the Shire desist from spraying Grazon on the roadside?
Okay, let's answer that question.
Is Grazon a particularly noxious herbicide, presumably?
Yes, if you look at the product details, it has lots of do nots, for example. Do
So,
not
Robert-
burn
Robert,
off, cut, clear.
Robert, essentially, it is their verge. They own the bits between the fences, and they're pretty much entitled to do what they like. If the spray that they're using causes damages to your property, you have the ability to argue that and you suffer loss and damage. When I saw the call was there, my real question would be, what if you're running an organic farm? So you've got organic certification because you're not putting any pesticides
Absolutely.
or herbicides, and then your neighbour or the council comes and does exactly what you're complaining of.
So
I don't know the answer.
What can Robert do? You don't. Is that
No, he's got an action against the council if any damage is caused. But other than that, it's an adjoining landowner who's doing what the adjoining landowner wants to do in their property.
So, Robert, if you're not already organic, go organic quickly, and then you'd have an argument in return. We've got a fair bit of homework.
Yes.
So I won't see you next week. I'm taking some leave over Easter, but Ali will be here, and she'll be far more polite to deal with than I am, and you can get to all the issues then.
Thank you, Virginia.
Thank you. David Whiting there.